are going to be cooking some awesome lamb ribs. Just got done doing leg day. I'm gonna keep the volume low because we have a 4-year-old sleeping, but that doesn't mean that we're not gonna have a blast talking about why DEI won't die. Bring your appetite, bring your questions, because this is going to be awesome. I'm gonna flip the camera around, give it to my girlfriend in 1 second. There we go. All right, bros and chicks, if any girls follow me. I still don't know if any women follow me on YouTube, but for the 2 of you who may be tuning in, hello. First of all, you'll notice this was Zercher squats today. Normally I don't work out 2 days in a row. At 37 years old, my body needs rest, but I did to juggle the schedule for this week. And so I'm drinking some Diet Coke just to get a little bit more energy back into my system. So first step with our lamb ribs is we got these from Costco. I don't normally buy a lot of my meat from Costco, but these just look great. What we're gonna wanna do is score the top. So score the top means you just go like this, just cut it up a little bit. And what this does is oops, you don't wanna do that because that kind of ruins the pan and gives you cancer. So scoring the top just exposes more of the surface area to heat and makes it nice and juicy when you cook it. So we're going to cut it one way like this, and we're going to cut it the other way. And I have now learned that we're always going to cut down towards the ribs in case the knife slips. It doesn't cut the pan, but rather it just cuts more lamb rib. Okay, so once we've scored the top, we're going to add our salt. And we're also going to talk through why DEI won't die. This is actually going to be an amazing discussion. Most of cooking these lamb ribs is going to involve just baking them. So before we want to throw these in, we should have preheated the oven to 450 degrees. I did that about 15 minutes ago, so it's nice and hot. But we're going to add all of this salt. And then we're also going to add a little bit of onion powder to the top. Just a little bit. And then I'm also going to put a little bit of garlic at the bottom. I'm just going to roast a couple cloves because I'm going to use these cloves on the bread that will be heating up. And I call it bread, it's actually tortillas, but the tortillas actually pairs very well with the garlic. It'll basically taste like garlic naan if you ever eat Indian food. So this will be great. It represents what you may see on the thumbnail right now. So we're just going to take the sprouts out in the middle before we throw these in. If you have any questions, throw them in there. I think the questions are going to be more around DEI. I have a lot to share about that, including my experience at Google. And what I really want to get into is why this virus has spread as rapidly as it has. You may wonder, I always wonder, because I'm a student of competition, I always wondered on the baseball field, why are inferior athletes who seem to be more poorly prepared, why might they be out competing me? Why do the people who I think are the best not always winning? I pay attention to these things in ways that normal people don't because it fascinates me when I try to understand why losers win. And so this has allowed me to understand the strengths of...
What does DEI stand for?
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. I thought that more people knew that
Repeat the
diversity,
question.
equity, and inclusion. If you didn't realize that, as I falsely assumed that everybody did who had a corporate job. But if you don't know what DEI stands for, you're probably fortunate. But for others, its former name was diversity. It went by diversity for about 20 years. That didn't catch on, so then it got repositioned to diversity and inclusion. It's a scam because everybody changed the wording at the same time exactly. Nothing happens like that in the real world. Nothing organic happens in that way. So we're going to put some of these garlic cloves on my half of the lamb rack. I'm going to share this with my girlfriend who does not eat garlic. And then we're going to put this in. I don't actually know how long this is going to go in for. I'm going to guess it's going to be about 18 to 20 minutes. 450, no, probably 16 to 18 minutes. But you'll notice I'm pretty good at just looking at the meat and knowing when it's done. I don't use these internal temperatures because I just, sense it. It's going to be great. And check back at about 1:33. So while this cooks, I'm going to prep some of the tortillas. I'm also going to wash my hands because I did touch the meat just a little bit. But the rest of the cut is going to be quite easy. So I don't need to do a bunch more. What you saw me do with the meat is basically the vast majority of what the cooking is going to be. And we're going to just get some tortillas hot, but we're not even going to do it right now because it's not going to take that long. So what we do want to do is connect that to here. We got the buttons on the stove off because my girlfriend's cleaning. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some ghee on the pan. And we're just going to let that cook on low heat for a while. Actually, I don't even need to put the fan on because it's going to be it's not going to take that long. And I want to wait at least 5 more minutes before we start cooking the tortillas because I want them hot before we eat them. So why DEI? Why diversity? Why arguments on the left don't die? It has to do with the way racism, Nazism is taught in school, and the way equality has sort of been bastardized in the United States. So our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, says that all men are created equal. Now, what Jefferson meant when he, among others, wrote the Declaration of Independence, very likely wasn't equality in the sense that it's now interpreted. I think it was very clear to people back then that certain individuals were more intelligent than others, were innately superior to others in their God-given abilities. But what they meant by all men were created equal was that all men were created with the natural predisposition to equally express their own talents. And that has been intentionally misinterpreted by people on the left. They think all men are created equal means literally we're all equal, and any inequality is due to bad things that strong people did.
Talk louder.
Okay. They thought that all inequality is due to bad things that strong people did. So you have to understand the mind of the Marxist. Marxists don't understand how winning works, and they don't understand how losing works because they don't understand how winning works. That's why their cities always devolve into chaos, is they don't understand how productivity happens. They think that wealth comes from stealing from people, and because they think wealth comes from stealing from people, they don't realize that wealth actually comes from intelligent people constructing intelligent ideas, seeking the reward of these intelligent ideas. And so, this is one of the reasons why Marxism always results in good shortages. So we're just going to spray around some of the oil in the pan. So one of the reasons why Marxism always results in goods shortages is because Marxists don't understand incentives. They don't understand that people need to be incentivized to do things in order to make money. They literally think that progress just happens, right? They don't realize that progress is the result of proper incentives being put in place and intelligent individuals taking advantage of these incentives. Does corruption exist in a capitalist society? Absolutely. But I think that Marxists legitimately think that the world would be perfect if it weren't for a few greedy individuals. And if we can just stop that greed, then everything else will be good. They don't understand that greed is innate to the human condition and that they themselves are expressing a lot of this greed through their status envy, which is what we see by poor journalists, writing for the New York Times, Washington Post, trying to take down rich white men or anybody who holds a stronger position in society as them. We're going to take a Diet Coke break. Give me 1 second for the gulp. Okay, so Marxists are not bad at everything. They're actually good at some things. They're good at getting more for themselves. So they're parasites, right? They're very, very effective parasites. They don't understand how systems work, but they do understand how to get a bigger piece of pie for themselves. And so what they are incredibly adept at is understanding, I'm going to turn the heat up just a little bit so I can cook these tortillas just a little bit faster, but nothing crazy. What Marxists are incredibly good at is taking advantage of arguments that are not politically correct. They're very, very good at shifting the Overton window, and by Overton window I mean they're very good at shifting what is permissible to talk about. Okay, so Charles Murray wrote The Bell Curve in 1994, and The Bell Curve was basically an attempt to understand why certain inequality exists within society, and if anything could be done about it. And the Bell Curve talked about IQ discrepancy across various social groups. And what Charles Murray, among others, noted, and this is very easily researchable, is that the wealthiest demographics, the wealthiest ethnic groups in the United States also have the highest IQs, and the poorest also have the lowest IQs. And that IQs are going up over time, as denoted by the Flynn effect, but it's very, very difficult to change somebody's IQ for the better. People born, and some of this is my memory, which could be incorrectly reflecting what was written in the book, but when you have certain minorities raised in the household of other ethnic groups, their IQs don't represent the households that they're raised in. IQ is very heritable, so if you look at identical twins separated from birth, there's a very strong correlation between their IQs, more so than their environments. So IQ is something that is very genetic, and IQ may not be predictive for extreme success, but it is predictive of a high degree of failure. So if you go to a prison, a lot of prisoners' IQs are like 90, 95, and what people have noted is prisoners are very poor at planning ahead. So if your IQ is 90 to 95, it's going to be below 70% of the population. And a lot of times people whose IQs are that low are very good at sacrificing today for a better tomorrow. And you'll notice this with unsuccessful groups or unsuccessful individuals. People who are very, very bad, have very bad time preference, who need things right now, or who are incapable, temperamentally or intellectually incapable of sacrificing today for a better tomorrow, will never make progress. In communities whose intellect is at the level where sacrificing today for a better tomorrow doesn't make sense for them, will never be able to achieve success at scale, which is why I think you see massive differences in wealth across countries, and it's highly correlated to the average IQ within the country, because why would anybody support a government that wants to sacrifice today for tomorrow if this is like literally beyond their intellectual capacity? So we see the bubbles coming up. We're going to flip. Check, see how this is going. All right, it's cooking fairly good. I think that's about halfway done. I think I put it in at 17, so 9 minutes. That's about what I was estimating, 18 minutes. Okay, so we talked about why inequality exists. And inequality, to be fair, there have been racist policies that have exacerbated some degree of inequality. The problem is absent these policies, what inequality would exist? And the answer is we don't know, but we have a very good reason to expect that the answer would be more than zero. As far as I'm concerned, the only way that society can eliminate racism or racial inequalities is by eliminating races through interbreeding. Like, you basically just need a bunch of interracial families to eliminate races, but then you're still gonna have smart people, you're still gonna have dumb people, you're still gonna have people at the top, people at the bottom, based on IQ differences and time preference differences, how they invest their money, what they're good at. So the left is populated by a lot of people who are at the lower end of certain skill sets. So they have the lower end of mental health. And it's not like they're all mentally ill. Like, there's clearly mentally ill people on the right, and there's clearly mentally healthy people on the left, but dissident ideologies, which is traditionally what the left attracts, people who don't like the system for what it is. If you don't like Western culture, which has been the most successful culture in the history of the world, if you find a problem, a huge problem, like a huge problem with the core of Western culture, you could be an extreme intellectual who's just incredibly perceptive beyond what other people are. But the chance, it's actually more likely that something's wrong with you temperamentally. A lot of times people will find issue with the society that they live in because they're at the bottom of the totem pole. Either they're not physically attractive, so you're going to see a lot of people on the left who aren't physically attractive, but they may not admit it. You don't need to be consciously aware of why you perceive that you have the short end of the stick. As long as you perceive that you have the short end of the stick, you're going to be naturally more inclined to want to flip the table over. So people who are mentally defective, people who are physically repulsive or just not very good looking, are going to latch on to dissident ideologies. People with poor social skills are more likely to latch on to dissident ideologies. And people who are poor are more likely to latch on to dissident ideologies, obviously, because they don't like the status quo. So the left appeals to people who don't like the status quo. And so the question is, if you live in a Western society and you don't like the status quo, is it because something's wrong with the status quo, or is it because something's wrong with you? As I've stated multiple times in this live stream, it could be that you're so smart and so perceptive that you're aware of things that are wrong with the status quo that can be fixed, and you know how to fix them, and that's possible. But more likely it's because something is wrong with you, and you don't want to admit that, or you don't want to address that. Like Jordan Peterson says, the first thing you should do is make your bed. If you think that something's wrong with the world, start with your room. There's something wrong with your room. Okay. Well, we still haven't gotten to why DEI won't die. Why these arguments seem to persist, even though they're so unpopular with so many people. And it has to do with the Overton window, because it is not considered to be okay to be, so it hasn't been considered okay to be racist in most parts of the United States for probably 60 years since the Civil Rights Act. Definitely on the coast, definitely in the north, for over 60 years. Now, the challenge for a lot of sane individuals is the definition of racism has actually changed a lot over these 60 years, where racism 60 years ago was to be prejudice against somebody because of their race, not give them a chance. Racism now, if you ask Ivy League students, Ivy League professors, can actually be defined as treating everybody equally. So under that definition, a lot of forward-thinking progressives from 60 years ago are actually racist by today's standards. And so the question remains, you can look at census information, and you can obviously note that certain groups are represented in greater proportion to their census representation, right? So if men are 48% of the population, but make 90% of executives or something like that, then our school system teaches you to think that something's unfair, right? Because the school system does not allow for the possibility that that different people are more likely to make different life choices. So, you know, women are going to be more likely to want to prioritize child rearing than being a gunner executive. Men are going to be more likely to want to prioritize status than to raise kids. And this, for anybody who grows up on a farm or anybody who's around small children, is actually knows that this is innate. This is not something that society just created because men decided that it was going to be fun to oppress women. But we have differing representation across groups, between men and women and between various ethnic groups. And the left has successfully closed the Overton window such that the people on the right are temperamentally shy about explaining the sociologically valid reasons for differing representation within various professions. And so when you make it a faux pas to explain why differences exist, then the only reason that people are going to publicly declare for why a difference exists is because we haven't done enough. You know, so you see all these executives say, well, we have a long ways to go. And we're not doing enough. We're not doing enough. We can always do more. It's like, these things don't mean anything. We can always do more. Like, well, we could do more, but should we do more? Should we do less? Like, you never have an honest conversation about how much should be done to address inequality within society, because nobody's actually done a study about like what is the right amount of inequality, what is the optimal amount of inequality to have. All of these studies, you know, like the BS McKinsey study about why all these companies benefit from diversity, they did not come up with an optimization point for the right amount of diversity. They just said, well, we should all have more diversity. So you know that these are intellectually fraudulent arguments because they don't say like anything. If you just understand how economics works, there's a point of diminishing marginal return and there's a point of negative marginal return. And so if diversity is something that is similar to anything else that exists, there should be a point of optimization and there should be a point where it's actually bad and harmful. And if they're not willing to say what these points are, then you know that their intention is not that of an honest individual. All right, so we're going to take some of this garlic off. And then I'm going to add a little bit of a Parmesan crust. And then I'm going to broil it for the last bit. So we got some Parmesan right here. Put it on my side, leave it off my girlfriend's side. She'll have some. There's no lactose in Parmesan almost. So it'll be tasty. It'll be good for you. Okay. So now we're going to turn this to a broil. We're going to broil that for about 2 minutes and then we're going to be done. All right. So, you know, as a practice, you need to understand that the arguments for diversity, the arguments for you know, the DEI programs hinge on you not saying what science says, because the people who push these programs know, they should know, maybe they don't, the data is not in their favor. And what the mistake that those who oppose them make is they always try to bring the arguments back to logic and reason. But logic and reason won't win you arguments. They just don't. And so that's why cancel culture exists. Cancel culture exists to shut people up. It exists to make sure that people who want to give real arguments will not give them. And it will continue because there's so much money to be made in playing these diversity games that they are gonna continue to go on for quite some time. So we got, but we got people like Bill Ackman who are starting finally to understand that this is it's a hate group. The leftists are a hate group. They want people who have more than them, which would include Israelis, and I think Jews more broadly. There's more anti-Semitism on the left than there is on the right, and that's something that a lot of old school Democrats don't realize. Is if you actually look at the data, there's a ton of anti-Semitism on the left, and it's college students, it's millennials. The millennial Democrats, the amount of Holocaust denial or Holocaust uncertainty among millennial Democrats far exceeds any other group. And so this is true across all ethnic groups. I think African Americans will deny the Holocaust at a greater propensity than whites, but white millennials, or all millennials, have a surprisingly high rate of denying or being uncertain about the Holocaust. All right, see what's going on right here. I think we like this. We're going to leave this in for. I'm going to leave that in for 60 more seconds, and we're going to take it out, and I'm going to show you that Chef Alex doesn't miss, even when he doesn't read the instructions fully. He just figures it out. You got to put the whole cold thing on the hot thing. Actually, let me stop this right now. We're good. Okay. Let that rest for just a little bit. Let that rest for about a few minutes, actually, because that's what my intuition says is the correct thing to do. Going to, at the same time,
Keep talking.
I'm going to test this out because this is delicious. Yep. Okay. And if you guys ever cook lamb, the lamb fat tastes great. And so one thing that I'm going to do with this lamb fat is I'm going to coat the tortillas with it, because okay, this is just a cheat code right here. That's all lamb grease. We're going to throw these bad boys on. If you guys have any experiences with DEI that you guys would like to share, we can talk about them. I can talk about my experience at Google when James Damore was fired for bringing up differences in men and women and why representation equality will never exist unless we understand why there are more male engineers than female engineers. This was a very, very traumatic experience for a lot of Googlers to talk through, and it's because they believe what the media says. And I was thinking about this for quite some time. Why was it so traumatic for these Googlers to get exposed to ideas that were basically obviously true? And it was because they believed everything that the media was saying about Trump, about this far-right extremist takeover, about all of these yokels supporting Brexit, and the more quote unquote educated somebody was, or the more exposed that these individuals may have been to Western media narratives, the dumber they actually were. The more in danger they thought they were from actually people who were simply more aware of what was going on. And I think Bill Ackman and his organization, they might have been on the ignorant side of a lot of these things for many of the last 7 years or so, but they're finally starting to catch on and understand exactly what the heck is going on. So we're going to start cutting these because that's how they taste delicious. Put them in nice little squares, triangles. 4-year-old knows her shapes, but clearly I don't. All right, put this one back. And if you look at diversity as it exists within like the Biden administration, it's almost just like a tool to rub in people's faces, where they just take the most offensive and absurd representations of diversity, and like the cross-dressing person who'd like to steal everybody's luggage, and they just like throw these people in your face. And I think there's something to be said about riling your enemy up so they don't do smart things, and I think a lot of their game hinges on that. But perhaps it's starting to fade. I think a lot of the reason why people like following me is because I'm able to articulate things that they've thought, but they haven't quite been able to put the words to themselves. And so once you realize that you're not the only one who thinks these things. A lot of people think these things, and there's a lot of research to substantiate what you think. People might wonder, like, how did Alex stay employed at Google for 6 years through all of this? And the reality is, you can say almost anything you want to say if it's said in a nice tone. And so that was one thing that I learned working a corporate job, is you can literally say a lot of things, as long as you have a little bit of a sense of empathy in your tone, and you can sense boundaries, and you know what can be said and what can't be said. It was always okay. I was the only person in my group who openly supported what James Damore was doing. Everybody else thought he was like some Nazi. But nobody hated me for it. I'm still friends with a lot of the people in my group. I just, I did more research than them on the topics that they strongly disagreed with me on. And
I have to talk.
okay. Well, we're gonna take a little bit of a break right now.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, you kidding me? Are you kidding me, Chef Alex? Are you kidding me, Chef Alex? Doesn't even look at the instructions. Oh, and just leaves it amazingly medium rare. Are you kidding me, Chef Alex? That is, you just don't do it to him, Chef Alex. That is how you do it. All right, so take a look at this. Oh my God. Let's see how Chef Alex did. Oh. My goodness. Thank you for tuning in. Chef Alex doesn't miss.